Welcome to Work This Way, a labor and employment podcast. I'm Tina Emerson, here today with Maynard Nexsen labor and employment law attorney, Cherie Blackburn. Good to see you, Cherie.
Hey, Tina. Thanks for having me.
Joining us today is our colleague Heather Matthews, a former journalist and CEO of NP Strategy, owned by Maynard Nexsen, and they are a strategic public relations firm that has been with the firm for a very, very long time. We're going to talk about public relations and crisis communications as it relates to employers. But Heather, start us off by talking about what NP Strategy does.
All right, Tina. Well, it's good to be here with both of you and talk about what we do because we have worked with both of you in your roles within the law firm. NP Strategy is a growing team of former journalists like myself, political insiders, and former communications professionals who are spread out in multiple states, serving clients across the U.S. What are we doing? We are helping people with messaging challenges. These could be challenges that's a crisis, but it could also be something that's good. Maybe an organization wants to open a new manufacturing facility in another state, and they want to message and communicate in the right way. So we're really strategic in what we do. Even with this podcast that we're doing, our video crew, the NP Strategy crew, is helping with that. So we help people tell their stories.
Heather, I'm so glad you're here because you and I have worked together a lot, and you have been invaluable for some of my clients, you and your team. So give us an idea. We're representing employers on a daily basis, and I think it would really be helpful if you can give us some ideas of how you've helped employers, whether it be media relations or some type of public announcement or getting ahead of a situation that's, coming down the news avenue, I guess. Can you just give us some information on that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's start with the media just because that normally scares most of our clients, and I understand it after spending, more than a decade in the media. I know it's a beast that's hard to understand. And just like Cherie, I'd never go into federal court, right, without being a lawyer and argue something. I often tell our clients, don't try to navigate the media on your own. Hire somebody who's been there before, been inside, or has a lot of experience, because in this digital age, one wrong thing is for your life online. So an example, within a 7-day period recently, we helped one client rename an arena in a large city in the United States. We helped with the messaging of the press release, getting the media out there, and navigating the media when they were on site. Now, the company had a communications team, but that team, their plate was full. And so this special challenge or opportunity needed additional resources, and we helped there. We have helped clients, Cherie, in the employment space, where they needed to close a facility. And then we really helped with internal and external communications. How do they communicate? Well, what is the top line message? And then how do they communicate that internally and externally, and in what order? That matters, or you make a mistake. In one instance, we helped close a unionized facility in Philly. That was really difficult because then we had to also have a stakeholder group of the union. We helped another company in Tennessee close a facility, and we actually got online with all their managers and trained them in how to speak with their employees. We hooked arms with the HR director, basically, and because of our backgrounds in doing media and presentation training, we role played with them because we knew it would be difficult conversations. I'm sorry you're, losing your role. You can go to another city if you want to move your family, but who really wants to do that? But they had to authentically have that conversation, and it needed to be the same every single time. So I often say we're an extra set of hands at pivotal points for our clients, and being owned by a law firm, we work really well with legal counsel. And that is what spurred NP Strategy to exist. It was 11 years ago. The law firm was helping Boeing and Nestle Waters locate in the Southeast. And they said at the time to the managing partner, if your internal people were an agency, we'd hire them. And when we thought about why, it was because we're ground game people. We knew who the stakeholder groups were and how to communicate with them. We are former journalists. We knew the industry from the inside out. And my goodness, we started with one employee, and now, we're pushing 30 in 4 states, and it's just been a wonderful ride. But we, we serve a lot of clients like yours, Cherie, and some that aren't law firm clients, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. And I've watched NP Strategy do things brilliantly for the firm's clients and outside of the firm.
Thank you.
And things are really nuanced with clients when they're going through a crisis. And your ability to understand what they're going through and, like you said, lock arms with the stakeholders to really understand what they're going through. Can you name a couple of projects that you've worked on that were really in depth with the group that were either for the firm or outside of the firm that came out really rosy on the other end?
Yes, that had a good outcome. Reputational risk issues for clients, it's one of those things where you have to be so very careful and calculating, and legal and communications have to work together. So let's say your CEO is drunk and hits and kills a couple of people. Like these things happen. Well, then what? I can tell you that the average communications team, that might cause them great pause, but this is all we do. So we start immediately reaching out to the legal team, whether it's in-house, outside. If it's not Maynard Nexsen, I proactively reach out and say, this is who I am, and I want you as a lawyer to review everything that we write, because it could be litigation down the road. I can tell you what you don't do in a crisis is you don't say no comment, which I still hear. And in today's world, that equals guilty. And you really can say something that says nothing. We can help you write that.
Yes.
But it requires some thought and really the perspective of doing this a lot. It takes a lot to rattle me. I covered 9/11 at the Pentagon, and that was a rattling moment and got me out of news. But since then, nothing substantial has really rattled us because this is all we do, and we see crisis, and we know there is always hope, and you can get through it if you're honest and smart about what you say. If you want to lie and hide under the table, we're probably not your firm.
And that outside perspective really keeps emotions at bay.
It does.
For a client that's really emotionally involved. Wouldn't you think, Cherie?
Yeah, I do. And, just listening to you, Heather, talk about the different projects, I thought of something else too. You mentioned fatality and all. You've also helped clients dealing with workplace injuries. It may be a very serious injury instead of a fatality, but it gets put into the news. And so helping clients get ahead of that. You mentioned closing facilities. And I can recall in one situation where you helped one of our clients, they weren't closing, but they were buying a facility. And so you had a lot of nervous employees, and people were all talking about, what does this mean that this new company is coming in? And you helped a great deal in that situation. One of the things that I have found that it's so important to have you kind of on our team is where we see a lot of discrimination cases now, and we see a lot of cases that are filed that make it into the media. I think more so than there used to be, partially because of social media, because employees or former employees will file a lawsuit and then go talk about it all over social media. Talk to us a little bit about how important it is for an employer to kind of get ahead of that social media and media presence.
Yes, and Cherie, thanks for bringing that up, because oftentimes, employers don't want to talk about it or deal with it only because they fear it'll make it worse. And you're right, there's more of this in the news, and here's why. 20 years ago when I was a reporter, I had to hoof it to the federal courthouse and ask for documents. You don't have to do that anymore in the digital age. And now with social media, people will say about anything online, and you can't let that stuff go unchecked. I'm not saying you have to weigh in on social media and say something, but you have to be monitoring that, because if you're not shaping your message, someone's shaping it for you. And most of the time, it's going to be slanted. I recall as a working journalist, plaintiffs' lawyers would call me all the time and say, hey, you need to cover this, or I've got this sexy suit. And they highlighted the sexy part, Cherie, and it was intriguing. I definitely wanted to cover that instead of going to the state fair all day long. And you have to be proactive about that. So the minute it happens or you catch wind of it, I'm hoping they're telling their legal team, and then legal needs to be thinking about bringing in media relations specialists like we are, or communication specialists, because not only is it going to attract the media, but your internal employees are going to think, what in the world's wrong? Or is this right? Or did they do this? And again, I'm not saying you have to weigh in on everything, but you have to be aware of that and have conversations about that. And those are just things that come naturally to us because this is what we do. I think if you told me to do a good story with unicorns and rainbows, I wouldn't know what to do.
But those are always the most fun ones, I guess.
Yes.
Now, like they say, good news travels fast, bad news travels faster. And
yes.
This is why you get media relations involved early on. You were talking earlier about internal communications. You've dealt with a lot of preemptive internal communications when it deals with reductions in force, or even expansions when you're doing good news.
Yes.
And also deaths in the workplace, things like that. Tell me the process for the NP strategy team when you have a preemptive piece of communication that you want to get out internally to mold and shape the way that employees are feeling about the company.
Okay. Let me use Samsung, and that it's a little bit of a hybrid of what you're talking about. And they've talked openly about using us. That's why I feel fine about talking about them. Samsung was looking to locate a facility in the Southeast. They hired us before the announcement was made. Actually, before they actually decided on South Carolina, they hired us. But they hired us because they wanted to communicate correctly to the South Carolina citizens first. So we mapped stakeholders in the state. Who are the key electeds? Who are the key people in the community in which they're going? Who are the key nonprofits? Who are the key business leaders? And so they would know with whom to speak. Then, after they announced, in 6 months they were up and running, so they swiftly had to hire people. We helped them with that. They weren't in the state, in the South. We had to help them with how to communicate in the South in a way that people would understand it. And once they hired employees, then how do we communicate with the local people? Again, we knew what the HR director wanted to do. We just nuanced it a little bit and helped them with that. All the way to, we still help with high school students going through that plant. So one day, hopefully, they'll work at that facility.
And that's the importance of having a group that understands connection, the power of connection.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, you have a team in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, all the places that NP Strategy is located. That's really important. And for your clients, Cherie, how important is it for them to have that connection on site and not working with a media relations or public relations firm that is far flung from where they're located? Oftentimes that local connection, knowing who the stakeholders are, is so critical to success.
Yeah, I think that's really important because Heather and her team know who to talk to, are able to deal with people who are in the media. And, a lot of times my clients will actually have some type of PR department, like Heather mentioned earlier, but they have their work to, they are kind of full when it comes to what they're trying to do. And they're really looking for somebody outside of the company on the ground here where it's happening or wherever it may be happening, who has the media connections. And that's been really helpful. And we've also had situations, and Heather, I know we've had situations where sometimes the client's not ready for something to be public, but you've come in and done, and I'm not using the right phrase here, but like a holding statement or like a statement that is something for them to be ready to use when it hits the media.
Yes, there are instances where we hope it never goes public. And we've been blessed with a few of those, but it's rare that bad news stays silent, but it can happen. And so we write, Cherie, what you're referring to is a media holding statement and employee messaging holding messaging, where if we have to talk about this, we're not rushed. The rush is where mistakes happen. That was the same when I was a journalist. Tina, you're a former journalist too. When you rush, you make mistakes. when you plan and involve legal and HR and all of us working together, then you have the best chance of success. You're not going to be 100%, but you're thoroughly tried.
Right, right. Having the group come together early so you don't look for anybody and the scramble isn't on at the last minute where you can get things wrong.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
sometimes, Cherie, you've been good about this. I will use a word in a statement that in the courts can mean something else. And Cherie and other lawyers have been like, hey, Heather, no, don't use this because of this. And it's a real learning moment for me and makes our messaging better.
And it's really valuable to have that partnership for sure. Now, let's talk about crisis for our clients. This is where everybody wants to hire PR quickly, whether or not they ever have had a holding statement. But when something hits the fan, they want something right now. What constitutes a real crisis? When should people really say, oh no, it's time to call NP Strategy?
Yes, we write crisis plans for companies, and there is a ranking where we ask a number of questions. One of them really being reputational risk. That's an easy one, but the impact with that within the community, the impact within their ability to operate, how wide the story may go, and we help companies rank that. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. And then what do they do from there? So we build this, what we call a CRT, which is a crisis response team. We help companies do this. If they have an ad hoc one, like we recently helped a large financial group in the Midwest. There are 5 states. They had an ad hoc one, but we helped them formalize it. Okay, this is what Tina's role is. This is what Cherie's role is. And these are the 5 people who are going to make decisions. And then we're going to practice this. Sometimes it's just, it just happens. So the Cherie may remember the case where the CEO ran his car through someone's house and the person on the couch died. That was immediate. Like there was no ranking that needed to happen. I mean, like some of them you just know. There's a fire, there's a death.
Sure.
But there are others, embezzlement maybe. Okay, there is reputational risk there. Then you start talking about how wide is this? How wide could the scope be? How much could it impact business? If you're publicly traded, it's a whole other thing. So there's a process to it. Not everything is a crisis. And sometimes I have to tell people, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like, oh my gosh, you just shocked me, this is a 2. And, it's wonderful to be able to tell them that.
Right. And that might not be a lot for some people. At a 2 for you, you've seen a lot.
Yes.
So that what might be an 8 for me might be a 2 for you.
Exactly. And, I was thinking about that. We had a client who Heather helped, which was a smaller client, because your team works with all different sizes, but this particular plaintiff in this lawsuit, although the lawsuit was public record, nobody was actually going down to the courthouse and looking at the pleadings, but she was putting just about everything that happened in the lawsuit, including deposition testimony and everything, on her social media account. And our client was seeing it, and it was about to drive our client crazy. It was to our client, it felt like a crisis. It's like she's saying all these bad things about this organization all over social media. So, and Heather, your team helped with that one.
Yeah, it's hard to tell someone that I know you're upset, but no one cares what this person says.
Yeah.
Right. Time to let this one go.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Tina. Time to let this one go. The rise of social media, everybody's a journalist, everybody's an expert. And if they don't have a big audience, I'd let it ride.
Well, that is great advice. Thank you very much for sharing
Yes.
everything with us today. If you ever have an issue with your employment law, you've got Cherie here. If if it really gets to a media relations point, we have NP Strategy all here at Maynard Nexsen. Thank you so much for this discussion. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us, Cherie. We'll see you next time on Work This Way.